What's up guys, Brad here from Piney Grove, and we hooked up the trailer because we're going to get a new piece of farm equipment. Well, at least new to us. What this video will be about is what to look for in buying used equipment. So what we're going to pick up is a 6-foot Frontier finish mower. And Frontier is made by John Deere, which isn't going to match anything that we own. But they're a real good mower, they're very expensive, and we found a used one. And yesterday, Mrs. Piney Grove and I went to go look at it, and we found some issues. And that's what this video is going to be about, what to look for in used farm equipment and why we made the decision to buy something that has some issues. So leave a comment down below if you see things that we might have missed. I'm sure other viewers would be interested in other things that they should look for when they're buying used farm equipment. All right, I got to get on the road. We'll come back here to Piney Grove, take it off the trailer, and talk about it. 3 people in charge. We got the mower here to Piney Grove. Let's get the tractor, lift it up a little bit, and talk about what we found and why we bought it anyway. One of the quickest ways I've found to hook up 3-point hitch equipment when you want to unload it off the trailer, hook it to the top where the top link goes, and then the bucket will usually hit where the pins are for the lower arms of the 3-point. In this case, it's actually going to hit the wheels of the mower. So I'm going to put a little pressure on it before I actually pick it up. Most of the lifting's done there. It's just leveraging right here. And I think that's strong enough. Just make sure I don't cut off that grease fitting right there. Should be fine. What could go wrong? I don't know if that'll make the editing process. What happened was I don't have any ballast on the tractor, and I knew that. And I hit a little hole there with the rear tire, and when I did that, it just felt weird, so I had to put the weight of it down. You saw the rest. It's fine. I just should have ballast on my tractor. When Deb and I walked up to the mower, first thing we saw was that it was bent here, and one of the casters were bent. So that's operator error. Someone was backing too close to a tree to mow, wasn't paying attention. So that's cosmetic, but it's the first thing we noticed. And again, the bent caster, which can be replaced as long as these parts here aren't bent or broken or rusted. The second thing I wanted to look at were the blades. So it was on back of a Branson tractor. He lifted it up, and I'll get you a picture. We're not going to go under here with it being held up by the hydraulics of the Kubota, but the blades are the worst blades you've ever seen in your life. So immediately it needs blades. So I wanted to price the blades, I wanted to price the caster, and just kind of get a feel for the different things it would take to get this thing back in good condition. This mower retails right around $3,000. I'll look up the price and put it here, but I think it's right around $3,000. So he wanted $1,500 for it, but I was already noticing some things that were wrong. So besides the dents in it, it does have some rust, and you can see some of this paint is peeling right here. And it's a piece of farm equipment, and most people keep their farm equipment outside, so it's gonna rust. So that's okay. It's okay to have some surface rust, but what you don't want is rust all the way through. On brush hogs and mowers, this deck right here, once it's rusted through, it's pretty much useless. You'll spend more money in repairing that by putting flat steel there than you would ever gain by getting it cheaper. So while I was there, I wanted to get this cover off because this cover covers the spindle, but also the belt that drives all of the spindles. But it's also a place where grass and moisture can trap between the deck and this cover, and that's a good rust area. So I wanted to get these covers off. Well, we were able only to get this cover off because the bolts were so rusty. So that's another clue, is how often have the covers been taken off. If you can't get the bolts off, they probably aren't taken off very often. So once we got this cover off, I was able to assess that where this cover meets the deck, it wasn't rusted through. So that was good. I could see one spindle, and this spindle seems in good shape and it has a grease fitting. But if you don't take the cover off, even though there's a little gap here to get a grease gun in, that probably hasn't been greased. So that's a big deal. If things aren't maintained, no matter who makes them, John Deere, Ford, Kubota, it doesn't matter, they're just not gonna last if they're not maintained. But I went underneath and I grabbed the blades and shook all the spindles, and all of them were tight. So I don't think there's an issue with the spindle. I was able to see the belt here by taking this one cover off, and there's 3 covers. There's 2 more that I'm gonna have to take off. And we spun it with the PTO so that I could hear the gearbox and make sure everything was turning correctly. Now, the owner of this, I asked him how it ran, and he goes, it runs good, I just cut with it. When you see the blades, you won't believe that this thing will cut anything. So keeping it generic when you're looking at used equipment, rust is okay, but rusted through is not okay. So now let's talk about one of the most important things on a mower and any PTO-driven piece of equipment like a brush hog or a tiller. There are many pieces of equipment that have a gearbox, and the gearbox takes the power from the PTO and turns it into some sort of rotational power. In this case, it spins 3 mower blades. The gearbox is a pretty durable part of mowers and brush hogs and things like that. You don't normally have a lot of issues with them. You want to check for leakage if you can from the bottom, but definitely on the input seal. We didn't see any leakage there, but I did ask him to pop the filler cap. These gearboxes run with 90 weight oil, and one thing I wanted to do was check and see that it had oil in it. So we actually took this off right here, the filler cap. It's also a vent cap, so as pressure builds up in here, it won't push out through the seals, it'll push out through that little vent cap. So we pulled that out, and immediately I saw that the oil level was not only to the very top, and it should only be about here. So that means maybe it was over service, but that gear oil was white or milky white, and that means that water has gotten in there. And so when you leave these things outside, there is a way water can get in there besides condensation and them being used and heating up and attracting water. But this thing actually has that much water in there. Now, it was an oily water, so it wasn't like it was straight water in there. So I know that it probably didn't hurt the gears inside of there. I've just got to drain that out real good, flush it out with diesel fuel, and then put some 90 weight gear oil in, and it'll probably last 50 years. But that's another thing to check, is the gearbox oil. Another thing to check is the PTO shaft, and this one actually has the collar type of shaft, which I'm not a fan of. You want to make sure that it slides in and out, it's not frozen. And because this was on a tractor and we spun it, I knew that the PTO shaft was in good shape. I will say though, that I'm going to take this PTO shaft apart, make sure it's lubed, and the collar was actually hard to operate, so I want to make sure that's lubricated as well, because almost nothing more frustrating than a PTO shaft that you can't get onto your tractor. Now I'm going to raise this up to show you those mower blades. I don't have any ballast on my tractor, so this is dangerous to be under here. So we're going to stand back here and look at these mower blades. You can see they are completely worn out. They're thin. The high lift portion of them is completely gone, but you can see they are just completely worn out. Every one of them. But while we had it up, we looked under the deck, and the deck is not in bad shape at all. And by taking that pause and looking at it yesterday and not going back till today to actually buy it, I learned that this is actually an option. Even though it's bent, this adds value to it as well. So those are our recommendations. Look for rust, check out anything that's moving and make sure there's no play in it, like in this case, a spindle. Check the oil in the gearbox, make sure it's not milky, make sure there's oil in it. Now, sometimes when these things start to leak, things that have a gearbox, people actually put grease in them because grease won't leak past the seals as easily as 90 weight oil. So if you find a gearbox full of grease, that might be a warning sign. But also, these things will run 10 or 15 years with grease in the gearbox. So they're getting lubricated, it's just not the proper lubrication. So in closing, why did we buy a used piece of equipment rather than buying a new one that we wouldn't have to work on? And the biggest reason is this is a quality piece of equipment. It does have some issues, but by buying it at such a low price, when they're over $3,000 new, and I got this for $1,000, I can put new blades on, they're $100, I can buy a new belt, I can do some sanding and some painting and put a new caster on it and probably maybe have $250, $300 into refurbishing it. I'll have $1,300 into a $3,000 mower that's built to last. So to me, it was worth it to take that risk. You just got to weigh out, do you have the time to work on something like this, or do you just want to get something brand new and not have to work on it? But even new things need servicing and need to be taken care of. So if we had bought it new within a year, it would need some sort of servicing. That's going to do it for today's video, folks. Until next time, y'all take care out there. And remember, life's short, tractor hard.